Hi, my name's Nicole.
My name is Shao.
Hi, my name is Aloy.
And welcome to the Dope Student Podcast. And who do I have here today?
Hi, everyone. I'm Camille Menns. I am an occupational therapist that has been working in the school district of Philadelphia for the past 2 years. Nice to meet you all. Nice to finally be here.
All right. Can you briefly introduce yourself to the camera and explain what led you to becoming an occupational therapist?
Absolutely. So again, I'm Camille. I'm from New Brunswick, New Jersey. I moved to Philadelphia for college. I attended Arcadia University and was a 4-year starter for Arcadia women's basketball, and then immediately applied to Salus University in Elkins Park, Pennsylvania, and completed my Master's of Science in Occupational Therapy there. Then from there, I went to Easter Seals of Southeastern Pennsylvania and was working there as the I did 3 jobs in one when I think about it now. I was a part-time daycare occupational therapist, a part-time early intervention occupational therapist, which meant I went into the homes of a lot of families and treated their 6-month-olds to 2-year-olds. And then I also was doing all of the paperwork for both jobs. And then in the September of 2022, I started in the school district of Philadelphia and was assigned to 6 schools here in Northeast Philly. This year, I'm thankfully only at 2 in Northeast Philly. So I'm here now.
What inspired you to shift from your initial goal of physical therapy to occupational therapy, and what challenges did you face along the way?
So when I started applying to colleges, I knew that I wanted to be in healthcare. It didn't matter to me whether that meant athletic training, if that meant physical therapy, but I knew that I wanted to know more about anatomy. But I also love psychology because I took AP psychology in high school. But when I started at Arcadia has one of the top physical therapy programs in the country. I knew that I wanted to pursue psychology as a major. However, my first semester, I got a C in biology. My second semester, I got a C in biology. And then my sophomore year, fall semester, I got a 49 on my anatomy exam and had to withdraw from anatomy and could not find the credits and the prerequisites. You have to have a very high GPA in those prerequisite courses to apply to PT school. And for me, I knew that I wanted to graduate in 4 years, and I knew that I wanted to continue to pursue healthcare. But it took a class that I took in college. It was called Career Planning, and it was with Cynthia Nichols. Shout out to her. She let me know that there was a different path for me, and it was called occupational therapy. I had no idea what they were. I didn't know what that entailed. But as I did more research, I found out that the prerequisites that I needed for OT were not the same for PT. For PT school, you need to have a B or better in biology, a B or better in chemistry, a B or better in anatomy. And for me, at that time, I just did not have the time or the effort to do that. So occupational therapy was perfect because at the time I was taking neuroscience for my psychology major, and I also was taking developmental psychology, and I knew that I needed to do well in both courses in order to apply to OT school. And so I figured out, okay, if I do well in anatomy, if I do well in those psych courses, I can carve out a path for myself. And that's how I was able to get into OT school my senior year of college.
For those who might not know, can you explain what occupational therapist is and what they do and why this field is so important?
Occupational therapy is a very diverse field, not in the sense of race and gender, unfortunately, but in the sense of an occupational therapist is everywhere. You can be an occupational therapist and work in a school. You can work in a hospital. You can work in a mental health clinic, specifically with people with eating disorders or other mental health disorders. You can work in the community. You can work in an office. Occupational therapy means in life, there are 7 major occupations, right? You have activities of daily living. That's like showering, taking care of your diet and nutrition. Those are all under the category of the activities that you do in your daily life. There are some things called instrumental activities of daily living, which refers specifically to taking care of others, like going grocery shopping or planning a party for your child or taking care of your pets. That's all IADLs, we call them. And then also you have the occupation of education, which is what I work in, the occupation of work, the occupation of social participation. So all of these occupations build a framework for OTs to work under. And what I chose to do was to work with young children, specifically autistic children and other children with neurodevelopmental differences. And the main priority for me was to make sure that Black children, and specifically children of color, were feeling supported and were feeling seen, because at this time in our country there has been a push for a lot of underinvestment into those specific communities. So I wanted to join occupational therapy for that reason, to address the issues and challenges that those communities face.
You mentioned that your occupational therapy is the perfect intersection of sociology and neuroscience. Can you elaborate on how these disciplines intersect in your work?
Absolutely. So, like I said, I work here in the School District of Philadelphia. My job, people see me walking around the building with this rolling crate, and they're like, what is in there? What are you doing with that? I have toys. I have things that look like toys but are actually tools. That's all neuroscience, because we all have a sensory system, right? We have our eyes, we have our mouth, we have our ears, we have our sense of touch. Those are all things that help us regulate our bodies, that help us stay and pay attention to what you're saying, the questions that you're asking. Think of it as a smoke detector. Everybody in their house has a smoke detector. As soon as you start frying things in a pan, some people's smoke detectors start going off as soon as the thing touches the pan. There's no smoke, there's no fire, but your smoke detector is super, super sensitive. Other people, you can be cooking in the oven, have gravy spill in the oven, smoke everywhere, and your smoke detector doesn't go off because it knows, hey, this person is cooking. That's what our sensory system is. And a lot of people don't understand that a lot of autistic children have a very sensitive smoke detector, or some of them have an under-responsive smoke detector. My job as the OT is to help them find tools and strategies and coping mechanisms that are safe, that are able to help them access their education. And that's what I mean when I say neuroscience is that way. But then there's also the psychology of it. What is going on in this child's mind? Some of them are nonverbal, some of them have limited vocabulary, and some of them can speak just like you and I can. But the people that work with a lot of autistic kids just don't understand that the psychology of them as an autistic person is actually very similar to somebody who is not autistic. Their brains operate in the same way. It's just how they demonstrate and how they present themselves, it differs. So that's also the psychology piece. The sociology piece is, yes, I'm working with children, which means that I'm working with parents, which means I'm working with families. And when I am having meetings, explaining to them what their child is working on, how much they qualify for OT in school, I have to manage the emotions of families who are uninformed, are confused about the educational system, and specifically just need a little bit more support emotionally with accepting their child's diagnosis.
What unique approaches do you use when working with neurodivergent children, especially autistic children?
So it's simple, which is very hard actually, but it's easier said than done. I count to 15. A lot of people think, oh, autistic kids can't do this, autistic kids can't do that, and they don't give them the opportunity to succeed or to fail. And when I work with children, especially children who are labeled as difficult, which I resent, I think that by counting to 15, I give them the space and the opportunity to respond however they want to respond, which means if I tell them, hey, put this ball in this container, and they do so, sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. But I would know if I didn't count to 15, because they have receptive language. They understand what I'm telling them and asking them to do. And I'm using simple 2-word phrases like ball in, ball out. That is enough for a child to understand what the expectation is. I have an expectation. The child is working on their own timing. I'm not going to force a child to do it on my timing because they have processing differences that you and I just don't understand and don't have. And so I count to 15 to give them that choice, to choose to opt in or choose to opt out. And some days they opt out a lot, but that's usually in September. Usually around now in June, they're like 100% locked in.
Can you explain the concept of occupational justice and why it is particularly important in your field?
Occupational justice is a term that occupational therapists use to describe the occupational deprivation that communities face. For example, when I say that children don't have access to safe responsible spaces to gather after school. Here's what I mean. I go to the beauty supply. I'm trying to get some shampoo and conditioner for my hair, and I'm walking into the beauty supply and I see a sign on the door that says, anybody under 18 years old needs a supervisor, an adult to be with them in the store after 6 p.m. or during school hours or on the weekends. And I said to my friend, I was like, what does that mean? Like, why can't a 13-year-old who needs scrunchies or who needs shampoo can't just come into the beauty supply and get what they need? That is one tiny example of occupational deprivation. Think about every space for you all to go to after school. You have to have money to get into a bowling alley. You have to have some type of parent or somebody supervising you or surveilling you in order for you to access a space for you to gather and hang out. So there is, in Philadelphia especially, a lack of infrastructure for people to gather for free, for people to gather unsupervised by adults, and for young people to just be kids hanging out. You don't go to the mall. You can't go to the beauty supply. You can't go to any Sky Zone without having someone there with you. And I think that's one reason that occupational justice, meaning the lack of resources for a marginalized community in this country to enjoy their full occupation, and in your case, it would be social participation.
You mentioned wanting to discuss how to create a framework for success after graduating middle school. Can you share some key elements of this framework?
I think that I was very lucky and fortunate. I have attended private school my entire life. I'm originally from Jersey, like I mentioned, and I graduated middle school I was one of 7 people to graduate from my middle school. I went to a very, very small Christian K through 8 school. And my thing when I graduated was I knew immediately what I wanted to do. And so I came into high school with a mindset of, I know that I like science. I don't know what type of science, but I know that I want to pursue science. And I know that I want to pursue working with people. I didn't know at the time it was going to be young people, but I knew what I wanted. I think that, unfortunately, a lot of my friends and a lot of people that I knew growing up in high school, they just were there to get their high school diploma and get out. And they didn't have the right tools going into college knowing, all right, I have 4 years at this institution. I need to have a plan for how to get through it and then a plan after I graduate. And a lot of people, it takes a long time for them to figure out what they want. My goal isn't to force people into a certain passion or force people into a certain career. I think that when we promote some careers over the others, like everybody is emphasizing STEM right now, which I think is fantastic. We absolutely need more diverse voices in STEM. We lose sight of the other careers that don't require the intensive, expensive education that STEM requires. So for me, I think middle schoolers should start thinking about, hey, I've seen this person, I've seen that person walking around my school building. How did they get here? What did they do before? And I think that there's internships, yes, but you don't need something so formal. Sometimes you just need a conversation just like this, where you're exposed to, oh, this is a niche career, and I had no idea it existed until I spoke to this person on a random Thursday. So if I was 13 years old today, I would encourage other 13-year-olds to watch YouTube videos about any career possible. Because people think that, oh, I have to have a certain lane, doctor, lawyer, XYZ, scientist, optometrist, whatever. You need to figure out what your interests are and figure out how to leverage that into something throughout high school and then in college.
What advice would you give to the students who are considering a career in occupational therapy?
I would tell them, start memorizing early and often. It's a lot of memorization. Like I mentioned, a lot of the prerequisites that I took, neuroscience especially, anatomy especially, it was just brute repetition, brute memorization. And I did not have those skills in college. I had to work at it. And I'm someone who finished anatomy with a B and got into OT school. A lot of people think that you need a 4.0 in order to get into OT school, or you need to be the top student in your class to get into. You don't. You need to develop a study routine that works for you. My biggest mistake when I was preparing to be an occupational therapist was looking around at my other classmates and seeing how they study. I'm seeing how student XYZ studies, and I'm like, oh, I need to do exactly what they're doing in order to make my stuff work. Or I need to study in the library for 8 hours, just like how they do. No, you need to figure out and look at memorization mnemonics. Like, I remember I had to learn something called the brachial plexus, which is this entire nerve and anatomy situation going on in your shoulder. And I created a mnemonic because I watched a YouTube video where someone else created a mnemonic. Like, don't think that you have to reinvent the wheel to be a good student. Try and find as many resources about memorization, read books about memorization, watch YouTube videos, listen to podcasts about how to trick your brain into memorizing 10 or 12 items at a time, because that is all OT school is. It's just memorization.
How do you think exposure to real-world experiences can benefit students in their education and career choices?
When I think of real-world experience, I don't jump necessarily to like in an intense internship where you're spending 8 hours a day shadowing a person or shadowing a therapist. I think real-world experiences are definitely being open and honest to emailing people that you enjoy watching or people that you enjoy reading about, and emailing them and asking them, hey, what steps did you take to get to your point? Or my favorite thing to do is, like, you know, when musicians and other artists are interviewed by like Rolling Stone or by Variety or The Hollywood Reporter, I quite literally read every single interview that they've done, because they drop these little gems of, this is what I did, I actually went down to this comedy club and I figured out, like, that's kind of what you have to do for every single career. If I would think of real-world experience, I would definitely consider volunteering. It doesn't have to be at a hospital, but that's what I did when I was younger. I volunteered at a hospital, and that's kind of how I figured out, oh, physical therapy might be my path. And then it changed to occupational therapy because, again, I took a career planning class and just did research of what are these healthcare programs that are different to PT school. So volunteering would be one, but also just engaging with your community more. People around you, the people around you have so much information at their disposal. You just have to tap into them and ask them questions.
What is one memorable lesson you've learned from interacting with students?
To listen more and talk less. I find that even now I'm sharing all of this information and I feel like I'm talking way too much. I'm usually listening before I speak, and I don't listen and in my mind, while I'm listening to you speak, think of my response to what you're saying. Active listening for me means staying present and agreeing and affirming whatever the person in front of me is saying, and telling them, no, I actually heard what you said, and I actually remembered because I was actually listening to you. A lot of people don't know how to listen. And I find that working with my students in particular, talking to 7-year-olds for 7 hours and 4 minutes every day actually makes me feel a little bit more informed as a 26-year-old talking to other 26-year-olds, because children, especially neurodivergent children, are so intuitive and so naturally generous with their spirit that a lot of people get harder and less vulnerable as they age. And I think working with my kids definitely give me more opportunities to be vulnerable and honest about how I truly feel.
Charles, was it your turn?
Nicole. Or yes.
Oh, sorry. You describe yourself as a lifelong learner who's enjoying learning from young people. Can you share a specific instance where you learned something valuable from a student?
One of my students, they asked me a question, Miss Camille, when are you going to, what did they ask me? Oh my gosh, my brain is blanking. They essentially asked me, when are you going to stop being an occupational therapist? And I said, I'm not sure the answer to your question. I don't know what you mean by that. And he said, well, you're always here on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays. When are you going to change into something different or do something different? Have you ever wanted to do something different? And I said, I've always been somebody who is interested in many different things. I don't know if I'm good at all of these different things, but the way that my parents raised me, they always raised me to pursue every passion that I've had, and they haven't limited me in any way of what I wanted to pursue professionally. And I think that people look at learning as something that only happens in a school building, and it stops as soon as you graduate high school. And I'm a voracious reader. I love to read. I love to listen to music and podcasts, and I think that whenever I have an issue or a problem, my students almost always give me the answer inadvertently. Like, when I think, okay, yeah, I'm comfortable staying here and doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, my students always ask me, like, no, what's the next thing? Like, what are you thinking about doing next? And I'm like, next? No, I'm just trying to live in the present moment. But particularly like that third grader, he kind of changed my whole trajectory of my life.
Last question. You mentioned that you take piano lessons every Saturday morning. How has learning to play the piano influenced or complemented your professional life?
So I actually made a commitment to myself when I was 9. I was 9 years old, and I had to choose between basketball practice and piano practice. And I naturally chose basketball because it was easier for me. Piano was hard. And at 9, I chose basketball. And for 12 years, I was a basketball player. And as soon as I finished school in 2021, I finished my master's degree, I said, now I can afford to do piano. I have the time. I don't have to wait for my mom to pay for my lessons. I can do it myself. And from 2021 until now, I've been taking piano lessons once a week, 30 minutes. One of the things that helps me is that it humbles me every time I sit at that piano, because I'm a student. My teacher is telling me, like, you have to use your hands this way, you have to sit this way, you have to play a lot slower, you're playing way too fast. And because I am now a student, every Saturday when I come in to teach, which is what I am doing, even though I'm a therapist, I remember, oh my gosh, I'm a student, I'm learning something new, they're learning something new. I need to make sure that what I'm saying is patient, it's kind, it's respectful, and I'm giving them the opportunity to make mistakes and to figure it out on their own. It's just me being a guide. I'm not asserting my will onto anyone, because a lot of people do that when they work with autistic kids. It's me giving them boundaries and saying, hey, this is what you're working on. I know it's tough. I know it's challenging. I know it's frustrating not getting it right. But if you stick with it, good things happen.
All right. We would like, before we end off, do you have any social media pages where we could reach you out on?
Absolutely. I am on Instagram now. I deleted Twitter off my phone, but I did not delete my Twitter account. But you can find my Twitter account. It's the same as my Instagram handle. It's YAGIRLCAMILLE. Yes, you guessed it. It's your girl Camille on Instagram and on Twitter. I do not have TikTok. I do not have Facebook. I do not have Reddit. But I'm active on Instagram, not active on Twitter. But if you go on my Twitter, you'll find some cool stuff.
We would like to thank Camille for coming out to the Dope Student Podcast. Thank you so much for watching another episode. Bye.
Bye.